All right, Invest Info, episode 22. This is a follow up to the previous video we did speaking on Bitcoin. In this lesson, I was thinking about calling it maybe Bitcoin for Dummies, and I'll be the dummy. But I have a special guest today. This is Firas. You can help me with your last name, bro?
Freajah.
Freajah. He's a Bitcoin bull. And last time we spoke off camera. We were talking different investment opportunities. Um, I was bullish in Invesco Mortgage Capital, and the word you used was concerning investing in Bitcoin, because I'm still a bit skeptical, was it would be pretty much irresponsible to not invest in Bitcoin. Now, since we last spoke, Invesco Mortgage Capital went from earnings reports of earnings from -10 to 6 cents per share, and Bitcoin has almost gone up 100% from 10,000. So it seems like we both um, made solid choices so far. Now, I'm gonna be the role of a baby. I don't know anything about Bitcoin. To me, it just seems like speculation, right? Just the next person's how, I just want to buy this thing to sell it to the next person for a higher price. And I want to say something too. We're not talking about the ETF that is that's traded on the stock exchange. You're talking about hardcore Bitcoin. Now, can you explain the difference?
Sure. So the what you're referring to, I think, is called the GBTC is the ticker symbol, which is from Grayscale Investments.
Mm.
What that is it's a third party, still a custodian holding a trust of Bitcoin. What I'm referring to is the actual Bitcoin that does not need a third party at all.
Right. So for those, there's a lot of beginners here. What he's referring to is if you have a brokerage and you type in Bitcoin, and you might see it as BTC on Robinhood. He's not talking about that. He's talking about actually buying keys or.
Yeah, so if I may,
Mm-hmm.
I'll start from the beginning since
Sure.
um, we're going through this. Essentially, it this
1 second. Can we just pause for one moment?
all right. So essentially, I don't consider any type of Bitcoin investment, ETN, ETF, the real thing. So when you buy Bitcoin on Robinhood, you're actually giving them money, trusting, having to trust Robinhood to buy the Bitcoin for you. What they're just doing is they're telling you that they're tying your investment to the price of Bitcoin. You still don't own Bitcoin. It's an IOU. Um, what I refer to and I say buy Bitcoin is to actually hold your private keys. There's an old expression that was started from a Bitcoin OG or one of uh, the main leaders of Bitcoin. His name is Andreas Antonopoulos, and he coined the term "not your keys, not your coins."
Mm.
So if you don't own the private keys, you don't really own the Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created to free an individual financially, economically from third parties altogether. The origination of Bitcoin came from the 2008 crisis when the originator Satoshi was fed up essentially with how uh,
And
these
Satoshi's not a real person, right?
well, Satoshi is an anonymous or
Right.
pseudo. It's a pseudonymous name, like uh, um, pseudo character that hides behind the name Satoshi. Could be a group of people. It could be one. I have my own thoughts on who Satoshi is, but that person was, or that entity, Satoshi was fed up with the way bankers, whether it's the Federation of Banks in the U.S. Forming the Federal Reserve, or the European central banks, um, were debasing money when there was a market cycles, the natural market cycles of an expansion and a crunch, and they were bailing Wall Street out, and that money was trickling down, so to speak, to Main Street, and a lot of Main Street wasn't seeing that money. It went directly to asset inflation, but it was debasing the currency. So someone that worked hard for their money to save, let's say they were saving up for their 20% down on a house, or whatever it is that they were saving for, their money was inflated away. That created a problem and a question of value. Um, Coincidentally, he or she or they, Satoshi, invented or discovered the solution to what's called the Byzantium, or the Byzantine generals problem, which is an old cryptographic um, solution that solved that age-old problem of encoded messages from the battles of long ago. So I think this is the biggest discovery for Bitcoin, is that which deserves a Turing Award equivalent to the Nobel Prize, because that's the discovery of Bitcoin. That's what separates Bitcoin from blockchain, is that uh, you're able now to exchange value, and that's what, when you break down what money is the medium of exchange and the store of value. And Bitcoin was able to solve a problem of being able for me to send value from me to you without any intermediary, without a bank. So it basically, to use Anthony Pompliano's words, short the banks and long Bitcoin, because big banks are becoming less and less relevant. The cheaper and cheaper the services that they provide are. Bitcoin eliminates the need for that. So it's really revolutionary. It's a new financial asset class. It's a breakthrough in both economics and technology.
Right. So for those listening, and again, a lot of new investors, Ferris is pretty much say, what I could compare it to is he's saying buying actual gold instead of a gold ETF like a GDX. That way, your money is some like you could have that hard asset in your possession as opposed to an electronic traded fund, right?
Right.
Okay, so I know that there's different cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin stands supreme. Now, what is to say that Bitcoin will fall and another cryptocurrency? What is the moat, if you will, the equivalent of a moat
Mm-hmm.
for Bitcoin compared to other cryptos?
I would say the moat for Bitcoin is its hash rate.
Oh, sorry. Let me also explain. A moat also means what protects it, what gives it its advantage. Because Warren Buffett, School of Investing, when we invest in something, we want some sort of protection because capitalism, everybody's trying to come after you. So you want that protection, like whether it be a name brand, whether it be a software mode such as IBM, where you can't take it out. It's a lot to take it out of the business. That's what we mean by moat. The thing that surrounds the castle. So
Right. So you'd think Apple has its moat because there is no phone that or operating system that has a full ecosystem the way Apple does. I think of the moat for Bitcoin being its hash rate, one, among others, but
can you explain the touch rate?
the hash rate is basically
The hash rate. Sorry.
the hash rate is basically the rate at which uh, the network is secured by. So let's say a Bitcoin, there's there's a lot of content out there to understand how Bitcoin operates. What I prefer for anyone to read first before anything else about Bitcoin is the actual original Bitcoin white paper that was written by Satoshi, which is you can just Google Bitcoin um, protocol PDF or Bitcoin white paper PDF, and then the secondary source is lop.net Bitcoin, and the hash rate that secures Bitcoin's network is what makes Bitcoin so special. There isn't a single blockchain out there even remotely close to this network security that Bitcoin has, which makes it practically impossible um, to be able to hack one Bitcoin private key address would equate to billions of dollars, which is not practical. because you'd have to change the ledger in order to hack Bitcoin, and it is decentralized by nature. So that's another moat, an added moat that Bitcoin has, in addition to the network security, which at this point is many exahashes. At this point, the most secure computer in the world. In addition to the hash rate, there's also the decentralization. So Bitcoin is the most decentralized network. It's not decentralized in terms of who owns the Bitcoin yet, but that's changing every time there's a boom and bust cycle of Bitcoin, which is why I love it, because it's organic, and the allocation of Bitcoin spreads every time this happens, because long-term holders that have Bitcoin eventually sell a certain percentage of Bitcoin that they have at a number, which causes it to crash because they have so much Bitcoin. But that spreads the wealth and decentralizes that. But the decentralization that I'm talking about refers to the actual operation of Bitcoin, which is between the Bitcoin miners, the users, and the Bitcoin holders.
Now, Bitcoin is often compared to gold, and gold has 6,000 plus years track record of being
Right.
tangible asset or desirable asset. Bitcoin, a little over 10 years.
Right.
And I think what scares investors is the volatility of Bitcoin. You
Right.
see a point where Bitcoin is just going to have a stable increase as opposed to, or like a constant volatility thing going on. I mean, where do you see it in the future? Do you see it always doing this, or do you see it like flatlining and probably going up?
That's a good question. So I think Bitcoin right now is logarithmic. It's exponential. I wouldn't say factorial, but what you're seeing, what you're witnessing, is the beginning of an adoption curve. And the more you zoom in, the more it seems volatile. But the more we zoom out over time, we'll see that it's basically curving up. Eventually, yes, it will plateau, and there would be significantly less volatility with time. And I expect that to be once all coins, or most coins, are mined. And this is by design. Uh, there is an incentivized system for greed. Bitcoin is ultimate capitalism, in my opinion. So gold has 6,000 years, and now you look at the stock to flow ratio for gold, and it's interesting to see that Bitcoin is quickly approaching and going to exceed the stock to flow for gold, and at that point, Bitcoin will be worth more to an individual in terms of a storehold of wealth, and an easier transmittability of value than gold. So that will happen at a much later time, um, after many halvings, and halving for Bitcoin occurs every 4 years. So the supply for Bitcoin, and that's what I mean by stock to flow. Sorry if there's anything that needs definition. You hear keywords like that. It's really easy to find the definition for that. But basically, what I mean is, take gold for instance. We've had gold for 6,000 years, but we're still mining gold. We're still finding gold, right? So what happens if you find enough gold on an asteroid in space that's more than all the gold combined on Earth? Gold instantly becomes worth a lot less, because what gives gold its value is its scarcity. So Bitcoin is becoming more scarce with time. It's limited. It's actually more scarce than gold because it's defined. We don't have an idea yet how much total gold there is in the universe. We know how much Bitcoin there is. And yes, you can fork Bitcoin, you can have other cryptos, but Bitcoin itself, you will only have 21 million ever mined, and much of that is actually lost through different ways. And every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's mined every 10 minutes gets chopped in half, and that's called the halving. So after a certain number of halvings, Bitcoin will flatten out and plateau, and that adoption curve will show that um, there's less Bitcoin on the market to sell, and the demand will also stabilize. So you'll see a lot less violent moves up or down in 50, 60, 70 years from now, and then during that time it'll be used as a viable currency. Right now it's more of a speculative investment. So that's the differentiation.
Right. So Bitcoin, it's on a tear. It's doing really well. Like from my perspective, the average goer is not as like the average investor, sort of not as gonna go in depth as you do with the Bitcoin. They just see it like, okay, I'm gonna get it now. Maybe I
Yeah,
can sell more in the future.
sure.
And what that is called is a short position. You
Right,
plan to sell in the future.
right,
Now there are more shorts ultimately than people that are long.
right.
Do you eventually see this thing going down? Like, what will be considered the bottom for you? You think there'll be so much shorts that everybody's just gonna
So I like to think.
because like with gold, it's actually some like you take gold and you could put it in devices and
Right, it's tangible.
right.
Yeah.
So I see Bitcoin as as a safe haven for my asset, and I could also sort of get a profit off of it. But
Mhm.
I'm just seeing like if Bitcoin right now, at least the ETF, all of a sudden hits 50,000 with this happening thing,
Mm.
you're gonna have a lot of shorts in that.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, I think that's good for the ecosystem. I think Bitcoin at this point is the most battle hardened asset. I like and embrace the enemies. I think as a Bitcoin holder and a Bitcoin believer, not that I treat it like a religion or anything, it's definitely flawed and susceptible to failure. But I love the fact that there are so many enemies, and there has been, including the U.S. government or
That's my next question.
the NSA. And just to finish that point on that is so there are some advantages for um, this being um, actually go ahead. I'll tie that back in. So go ahead with your question.
Well, it kind of links with the fact that we're talking about moat and Bitcoin being protected. Fed Chairman Powell is speaking about a Fed coin,
Right. Yeah.
and China is also working on their
Yeah.
particular coin, which is another form of digital currency. What does it say? Bitcoin does not become illegal. This
Sure.
happened to gold. This happened to different assets throughout time where
Sure.
the government deemed it illegal.
Sure. Yeah.
If you are not, if your funds are now tied up, your assets are now tied up in something that is illegal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, what would you say to that? Like,
So remind me of these questions if I lose track or if I lose my point, because there's so much involved with this, and that's a good point. Like what's the bottom of Bitcoin?
and what
What
stop it? Yeah, like,
what happens if it becomes illegal? I There's a term, I don't think it's a real word, but Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. So when the U.S. government outlawed gold in the 30s, because the central banks, after the 1913 charter, decided, you know what, we're going to, quote, back US dollar by gold up until 1971. During that time, you want to have gold because you can't necessarily trust the government to make the best financial decisions. For example, the debt that we've had since World War II has not been repaid. All the government or all the banks, the Federal Reserve Bank or the central bank did was just inflate the money away, printed more money, to where now the $200 billion that of debt that we had in World War II is now just a drop in the bucket of the actual 21, 24 trillion dollars worth of debt that we have today. So that puts things into perspective, that value, in my opinion, should not be dictated by bankers.
these bankers are very powerful. I mean, if they
Sure,
feel threatened, you
but
don't
what
think
gives
that.
them their power is them holding the money. Bitcoin puts the power of money back into the hands of people. So just the question of where do I see the bottom for Bitcoin? Yeah, it could go to actually near zero if it's a collectible, which I highly doubt, because there's a demand, there's a real use case for Bitcoin, even if it's illegal. So to just the greater perspective, there's 300 right now, as of today. Bitcoin is worth what, $350 billion in market cap. There are,
How does that price determined?
well, because you take the amount of Bitcoin there are in circulation, multiply it by the price, and that's the market cap. Just like the stocks, the amount of shares times the price, and that's the market cap. So you look at Bitcoin.
So
Sure.
market cap is the amount of bitcoins times the price, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be less bitcoins in the future.
Well, there will always be 21 million Bitcoin or less, and the only time it goes lower is if there's Bitcoin that's permanently lost. For example, if I'm irresponsible with how I hold my Bitcoin, because just like the power of money or power of value gets put into the hands of Bitcoin users now, whether it's miners, developers, or users. Um, it's also my responsibility to hold my keys because right now at a bank they're holding my money. So as long as I show them my ID, they should be able to give me my money.
Mm-hmm.
How are we on time?
We're good. We're good. We're good. We're good.
So if I lose my keys, no one has access to my Bitcoin. I lose them from myself. So that's Bitcoin that's lost forever. So in theory, that actually raises the value of the remaining Bitcoin because it becomes more finite. Um, so back to the market cap thing. One company alone, there are several companies that are worth over $1 trillion at this point.
Right.
And Bitcoin is just 1/3 of $1 trillion. But if you really want to, if you actually expect that maybe there are more logical companies like MicroStrategy out there who now use their treasury reserves instead of holding it in dollars, they hold it in Bitcoin, which I think is a very logical and progressive approach. If pension funds and all these funds...
Is that why we saw the huge spike in price?
It contributes
speculation,
to it.
Maybe rumor by the rumor, sell the news kind of thing.
I think a lot of it has to do with PayPal buying 100% of or over 70% of the Bitcoin that's been mined in the last month or two. I think that has a lot to do with it because PayPal now understands the potential of Bitcoin.
Well, not the movement price of Bitcoin, but the company you mentioned.
Oh, MicroStrategy.
MicroStrategy.
Right.
The ticker symbol, I can't remember the ticker symbol, but they had a little run.
Oh, yes, because they're worth more. Because, their treasury capital reserves, right now, the profits that they've made more profits just holding Bitcoin than they have from their actual business. It's a really progressive approach because the dollar is being inflated away. Even Jerome Powell said we're targeting high inflation for the next coming years. So that puts a floor, in my opinion, on the price of Bitcoin, but also raises the ceiling way high.
Can I just, for the viewers there, you mentioned high inflation, and Jerome Powell said that because even though they've been printing a whole bunch of money, the Federal Reserve doesn't have the power to buy, only lend. So there is more borrowing in the form of issuing more bonds, but not actually printing tangible cash. So we see in that what the Federal Reserve is doing is more deflationary than inflationary because it's all about money velocity, right? The exchange of dollars.
Well, there's deflation happening because the supply shock demand that's happened in the world, and they're trying to regulate, which makes it less of a free market economy. This actually hurts regular people, and it helps people that are asset wealthy. It hurts people who are saving cash or working for cash.
All right. So again, a lot of people that are listening are like, this is new to them. So with the Federal Reserve printing more money, interest rates being low, that creates an asset bubble, an asset inflation, and stocks, real estates. And even right now, we see Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is not being inflated by what's going on with the Fed. You're saying it's being inflated by the happening?
I think Bitcoin is back to economics 101. Bitcoin's supply is fixed, but the demand is only increasing.
Right.
And it's still just the beginning, in my opinion.
So a lot of people said that.
Right. And now to the second, you mentioned another question about what happens if the Fed has the Fed coin and the central bank coins. That's good. I actually have been audited by the IRS. Happily, was very transparent, and I said it on record as I was being recorded. I said, I think the U.S. Treasury needs to hold Bitcoin in order to protect the U.S. dollar. So if the Fed has a Fed coin, it should be backed by fixed assets like or scarce assets, hard money like gold, like Bitcoin. If Facebook succeeds in having Libra, the Libra token, that would be backed by multiple currencies, including Bitcoin, in my opinion. But if the government tries to, if they wanted to make it illegal, they would have by now. And they met with people like Nick Szabo, like Mark Andreessen, the CIA, the NSA. They've they've looked into it. Were they able to ban Bitcoin or block Bitcoin? China's tried it. Russia's tried it. The cat's out of the box at this point because you can't confiscate Bitcoin from someone who has the private keys. You can shut down the exchanges, and that will affect the price if they do that. But you can't, even if you make Bitcoin illegal, you can't stop Bitcoin. The ledger is in place. The mining network is too decentralized. There are too many. There are too many players, and it's game theory. What it boils down to with money and all this, the stock market, economics, real estate, it's a power game, and Bitcoin was created. If you read the white paper from Satoshi, it explains this. It explains how people are fed up, and it's not about politics as much as it is about power and control. Because politics, all this politics that we're seeing is a distraction. It really boils down to money, and Bitcoin is the internet of value, whereas the World Wide Web is the internet of information. So that's why I think this is revolutionary. Is you can't stop this.
You said the current market cap for Bitcoin is $500 billion currently.
A third of it. It's like around 350 billion.
Right. So we have a government that has the ability to print infinite amount of money.
Right.
What is stopping them from buying up the entire, if well, not the entire,
Whatever's left of Bitcoin.
right, and then manipulating the price there?
Yeah.
So if they can't,
But just by them doing that,
would that increase the demand, or like if I'm one that's anti-establishment and I see that the government or the Federal Reserve is buying a ton of Bitcoin, even Jamie Dimon, who's anti-Bitcoin, his stories come out that he's buying Bitcoin. Now I'm seeing all these big.
Yeah, Jamie Dimon, he's a joke, by the way. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm just saying, if you see all these top investors, you see big sharks
Right.
coming to this market, the first thing you should be thinking is manipulation.
Sure. But they're late to the game. For institutions,
they're late, but there's also retailers that haven't yet touched it.
Right.
So when these big sharks, and we've seen them, in the stock market or real estate or even Main Street now, by collapsing these small businesses. When the big fish get in the water,
Sure.
it's very hard for the small fish to swim and survive.
Sure. Yeah, my advice to like the average person like myself is not to put all their money or all their eggs in one basket. The whole idea, I mean, you're making a big mistake if you buy too much Bitcoin compared to what your actual liquid is, because you're biting off more than you can chew. Because it's not about how much you buy of Bitcoin, even if it's gonna go up 20% tomorrow. It's the winner at the end of the day. The winner at the end of the lifetime is the person who has the long-term perspective, and you know that. Like, it boils down to dollar cost averaging and holding. The longer you hold, the shorter your time preference is, meaning the longer your time perspective is. When you don't have a preference to tomorrow and you have a preference to 50 years from now, that's the advantage. So my advice is make sure you have a small allocation percentage of your net worth of Bitcoin. If it's 1% of you of if I put $1 into a fraction of a Bitcoin and I only have $100 and I put the rest in wherever else, as long as I don't spend this $100 and I just allocate it across different asset classes, if Bitcoin goes up 100x, I've just doubled my money without any risk. Um, but if I put all my money in Bitcoin, of course I'm going to be really emotionally attached and be inclined to sell prematurely. It can go up, it can go down, it can crash 80%. But historically, every cycle, when it crashes 80%, it's still above what the previous all time high was.
Right. Now, we spoke about history. Gold has a history. The stock market has a history. The real estate market has a history. These things have periods where they go sideways for 10 years,
Yeah,
12 years.
yeah,
And as an investor, you could say, okay, well, I know this would happen. I know this could happen with the price of gold.
yeah.
If Bitcoin, it did a lot of consolidating. Last time it was at 20,000 was about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
To those that held, good job. Like you said, average. Because we know, like, with stocks, the longer you hold them, the less risk, right?
Right.
As opposed to bonds, the longer you hold it, the more risk. Because Warren would say, because eventually, stocks are parts of business. As the business grow,
Yeah.
eventually you'll make 100% return on your money. The rest is house.
Right.
So with the Bitcoin now, if we see Bitcoin sideways for a long duration of time,
Yeah.
would that? I mean, again, that's wouldn't that lift short sentiment, or you think that would be a case for the bull, like a bullish approach? When I say bearish or short, those that plan to sell. When I say long or bullish, I'm talking about those that plan to buy. If we see a sideways in Bitcoin,
Uh-huh.
you're a long term guy, but not everybody's long term. Retailers are quick.
Sure.
Do you see it going down, or
Yeah.
do you see a situation where it consolidates for a number of years and then starts to shoot up?
So I think sideways is always relative. If it's sideways during a market cycle where interest rates are high, um, what matters. So there's a term in economics called the CPI index, the Consumer Price Index. I care about how much is the price of a gallon of milk, you know, and like I want to know that the cash that I have or the liquid that I have on hand or the assets is matching up with the prices of everyday things that I'm going to buy. So is me having $100 or $100,000 holding it, is it a good idea to hold it for 2-3 years when the price of everything is going up? It's
Yeah,
not.
so we know it's not good to really hold cash. We have to
Right.
invest our money in something.
So if Bitcoin goes sideways, then
And you're seeing your money just sitting there flat.
right, then it's actually not doing its job for being a good storehold of wealth. I think that's a poor return. Bitcoin to me is not an investment. It's basically just it's a it's
Store of
a
wealth.
store of value, a store of wealth. It's until it becomes more of a medium of exchange. You can use it as a medium of exchange, but ask the person who bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin 10 years ago. He's not going to feel so happy about it. But anybody who's looking short term, you're already making a mistake right there. I mean, you want to, before anything else, you want to make sure that you're being productive and you're making an income. The idea is, what do you do with that money? If you keep it in Bitcoin, I think that's a wise choice. Maybe not the whole thing, but like I told you before.
That's what I want to ask you next. You said don't put your whole investment in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I have a family member, private banker. Someone came in with 500,000. I don't know how much of his portfolio is 500,000, but he
Right.
put it all in Bitcoin.
Right.
Now, typical 60-40 stocks bonds kind of thing. 100% of your portfolio what percentage of the portfolio would you put towards Bitcoin on average? Between stocks, real estates, bonds. How would you diversify the portfolio with the Bitcoin?
Well, I've been
Because you have certain people that's their thing, just crypto.
right, which is very wrong. I mean, if you're a betting man, but gambling ultimately loses you money. Uh, Down the road, doesn't matter how much you're making, it's going to lose you money. I think the responsible approach is to pay yourself first when you get paid, whether it's your own business or a job. You want to put, I would say, 5-10%.
And this is just Ferris personal. We're not telling you to do anything with your
Right,
money.
right,
All right. It's not trying to convince you to Bitcoin or anything like that.
right.
This is just about like to help myself and those that really don't understand. And again, when I say understand, I mean see the price of this thing in the future. There's no discounted cash flow. There's nothing I could really use, but the argument that you're making is to why it would be a logical and
Yeah,
responsible decision to have some of your assets in
right,
Bitcoin. So that's what we're trying to do. We want to know the safety, we want to know the moat,
right.
speculation point of it. What if it's sideways? What
So,
happens to my keys? What if they, I don't know, what if the internet goes out? These
so
types of things.
the best investment you can make with regards to Bitcoin is to learn about it first. I really, really believe in the stock to flow ratio. I think you have to have, like, I mean, personally, me, and like you said, I'm not a financial advisor, but I've done well by dollar cost averaging. I put almost the same amount of money into Bitcoin every single, every 2 weeks for the past 2-3 years, and it's done very well because over time, it doesn't matter whether the price is high or low. Its long term chart will show you it's going up. Um, but I like an even allocation if you want to be risk neutral, to have 25% Bitcoin, 25%, or I shouldn't say Bitcoin, but 25% crypto, which needs to at least be 80% Bitcoin, maybe some Ethereum, and you don't want to. All the other ones are very risky and
The altcoins.
altcoins, and I call them shit coins because that's the term that we use. Um,
And
but
why are those shitcoins? Why?
Different reasons. Most of them are scams. Just like during the '99 bubble, you had your Amazon and Apple, which
It's
was
true.
you didn't know about them, but then you had or you did know about them, but you couldn't really be able to predict the future that AOL is going to go bust, or these thousands of other no-name ones that you were going to bet big on and expect these huge returns. But generally, like I think real estate is the only other thing besides Bitcoin that's truly scarce. Land is truly scarce. So I say real estate 25% around, more or less. Of course, you play with these numbers according to what you have, but 25% land, 25% gold, 25% stocks, 25% Bitcoin. Cash is just the worst in my opinion because, like we talked about, it's just being debased. The more they print, the less your money is worth. So that's what it boils down to is you want to have a long-term horizon. You want to think long-term, hold on to it as much as possible, and don't let people trick you out of your money by putting you in debt. I think debt is the worst idea because the current economic system, the fractional reserve lending that we have going on, makes this a debtor economy. The winner in the game is the debtor, is the person, is not the person who's taking the loan, the person who's giving out the loans because they want the yield. What Bitcoin facilitates is instead of a debt-based economy, it's an asset-based economy.
So what Ferris is pretty much saying is after you pay yourself or make interest on your investment, you take care of everything you take care of. You say in 25, it wouldn't hurt to put 25% of that in crypto, uh, in Bitcoin. It's
Over time. I'm sorry, not like because like right now, full disclosure, I think it's ridiculous if anybody buys Bitcoin this high. You want
How do
to
we know this is not the bottom?
well, it could be right, But as long as you're buying dollar cost averaging, if you're putting all your money or all 25% in all at once, yeah, it could double, triple, quadruple from here for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but you're tied to it, right? But if it goes, if you say, okay, I have 25% of my portfolio, I want to allocate to Bitcoin, but you do it gradually, where I'm buying every month or every week or every 2 weeks, whatever the case is. You can buy it on red days, the times when it's down. You don't want to buy something as it's climbing up high. You want to buy the correction. I mean,
March was a beautiful time.
yeah, oh yeah, and a lot of
But
people
in
capitalize
March,
on that.
Bitcoin fell to 4,000.
Right. Well,
But in when Bitcoin was 400, 4,000 it seemed like that's the very top. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So it's like, I mean, we don't really know the top of this thing.
We don't. We just know that it's a very immature asset class, and the reason why it fell so hard is because there was a flight to liquidity. Even gold fell in March. I mean, gold fell, and that's because people just cash was king because there was ultimate uncertainty, a global scare, stocks, Apple, Amazon, everything that you think is like not going anywhere fell because
Yeah.
people wanted cash.
Yeah. And
Um,
at that point in March, the dollar was extremely strong.
right, and
I mean,
and
it's still relatively strong currency, but
yeah, yeah, but even Bitcoin's parabolic market rally in 2017, when it started the year at 700 and ended the year near 20,000. Even during then, there were at least four times when it fell 30%.
mm,
So you want to buy it at the 20 to 30% dip. You BTFD is like the term is hashtag BTFD, buy the fucking dip. That's what it is. Excuse my language, but that's the idea. You don't want to buy something when you don't want to buy the top tick, because that's greed that makes you do that.
bag holding,
Yeah,
which is pretty much when you buy something at its highest price and it begins to fall and you sell it at its lowest price.
yeah, and
You
you hold the
hold it, you
bag.
hold it at the
Yeah, and
high.
I've held the bag
We
before.
all have.
Yeah,
FOMO, fear of missing out,
yeah,
emotions.
but but yeah, I mean, uh, so like long term vision, um, patience is what pays, and reducing your risk is what's important. Greed will end up destroying anybody.
Okay, so I'm gonna close up soon. Just a few more questions. You mentioned liquidity. You had a situation in Venezuela where gold became cumbersome, and a lot of people were trying to store their wealth because of the situation, and those that held Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
was able to leave the country,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to take their gold on like a suitcase, and you go to get it stopped.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you with your keys, you could go all over the world, and
yeah. You can literally memorize your private keys in your Bitcoin. No one would know that you have it. You can travel the world. See, we're very blessed as Americans to have our currency be the world reserve currency, which might not be for long, but our currency hasn't been hyperinflated away like Venezuela's or in Lebanon and these places, or like Germany in the early 20th century. But there are countries out there that have a lot of problems, and Bitcoin solves those problems. Um, like not having IDs and being able to get a bank account, the unbanked. Bitcoin actually started out with a lot of very virtuous principles that's been corrupted by scammers and all that. So the in some ways, to the average person, Bitcoin's reputation was tainted and tarnished. But that doesn't stop Bitcoin. That doesn't change Bitcoin. Education is what's important. You want to learn how to protect your keys. How to, I mean, the safest way is probably a hard wallet, cold storage, away from the internet. You don't want to share your keys with anybody.
away from the internet. Can you
Yeah,
elaborate on that one?
yeah. So, the riskiest way to have Bitcoin is to have your Bitcoin on an exchange that can be hacked. The least risky way is very complicated. It's a very technical process. A very, very well respected man in the Bitcoin space named Jameson Lopp solves that problem for you with something called Casa HODL. It's CASA. That's the name of the company. But it's very complicated to be able to have the ultimate security for Bitcoin, which is um, it's a glacier protocol, which is complete glacier, meaning like frozen, like an ice glacier, completely below sea, which is cold storage, completely away from anything similar to a hot wallet that's connected to the internet. This would mean that basically you can have Bitcoin,
On a
um,
hard drive.
a hard drive, if you never connect it to a computer that has access to the internet. But what I mean is a cryptographic hard wallet like Trezor or Nano S. But even beyond that, you can actually have a Bitcoin node and download the entire Bitcoin blockchain, which at this point is, oh, I don't know how many, over 100 gigabytes. It's actually a lot of storage. It takes an entire computer if you want to have your own node, which is I think what banks are going to end up doing. But you can secure your own Bitcoin. That's a technically complicated process. I think the best way for the average person is just to buy a hard wallet like Trezor or Nano S and then never connect it to the internet unless you absolutely need to. Never share your private keys. Keep it in a safe. That's personally what I do.
You make your own keys, right?
Yeah, you have your own private keys.
You make the keys. No one's giving it.
Well, it's a randomly generated. It's issued. It's a cryptographic private key, and that's how you have it.
Old school, like the keys, like a Cajun kind of thing. Like when you'd buy a software and they'll have the keys on the back, kind of. That's
Yeah. Well,
oh.
yeah. It's very. It's a. I mean, it's a very interesting. That's why I said it's really a modern marvel, a technological marvel.
And how many characters are those keys?
Um, so the keys are represented by a passphrase. It really all depends. But it's a lot of it's. I think it's 32. But I know there's the seed phrase to generate um, the key is a 21 word. It could be 12 words or 21 words, something
So
like
your
that.
keys are to access your Bitcoin could be whatever you want it to be, or is it
No,
actual words?
it's letters, like letters and numbers that's generated. Very random, impenetrable.
And how many characters?
I That's a good question. I think it's 32.
And once you have these keys, is there some type of two-step verification? Like you need the keys and something else, or just
Right.
keys?
Yeah. It depends on how you store it. There's a lot of ways to be able to store Bitcoin offline,
But I'm
but
saying to get access to that Bitcoin,
yeah,
can you have an option where it's keys and something else?
yeah. So I have my private keys, my seed phrase, and in addition to that, I have another code, a passcode that I have to put.
Three-step verification.
Yeah,
Oh wow, it's
and,
good.
but you can add. I mean, if you're a technical person, I'm not the most technical when it comes to actually protecting it. Like I tried to do the Great Glacier Protocol until I realized it's safe enough by me doing what I'm doing. Taking it a step above is if I had, 50, $100 million. That's really when I want to take it to the next level. If you have like one, two, three, up to like 6 Bitcoin, that's still going to be a lot of money in the future. I mean, it's a lot of Bitcoin. Having one Bitcoin already puts you in the top percentile. But yeah, it's there's a lot to learn. I mean, once you go in the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, you can keep going as deep as you want.
You spoke about Bitcoin being currency. I think we'll finish up with this question.
Yeah,
You spoke about Bitcoin being currency,
yeah,
and if Bitcoin does become currency, at least how you define it, it'll be a currency for the people by the people, right?
right.
How? I mean, so if this is currency, where's the government playing this?
So the government
Where's the government in a society where Bitcoin becomes currency? And if it's currency, now does it face the problems that normal currency face, which is inflation?
no. I mean, it does have it's being inflated by the supply. Every 10 minutes right now, there's 6.25 additional Bitcoin being added. until it reaches that 21 million, which is in the year 2140, something like that. But Bitcoin, the governments can be a spectator, or they can be a participant. And
But what if they make it illegal? If the government can't touch the currency that's being used in its government?
they can make it illegal, but what are you making illegal? I mean, you're making it illegal to transact in Bitcoin. You can't stop it still. Like, I mean, there's always going to be a demand for the transmission of value without a third party. If we go to a cashless society, we lose freedom.
Seems like Bitcoin is already a currency. I mean, they use it.
Yeah, I mean, it can be used as a currency.
People do, yeah, but you ultimately have to, after you transfer that Bitcoin, you have to convert it to the currency that is used by your government.
Well, not necessarily. I can right now. I mean,
I can't go into.
There are businesses. I've done it before.
Take Bitcoin.
I've bought a meal with Bitcoin before.
Right, because this is not. But the government says, okay, that's
legally acceptable. Right, that's one government, but the whole world will not. Like right now, we still have.
You don't think the government will try to?
I think they've already tried. It's already been done.
No, but okay, so you try to go to Starbucks, get your coffee. We don't take Bitcoin. You try to go to,
There are ways around it. So BitPay and there are other ways around it. The beautiful thing about this technology is I can spend Bitcoin anywhere in the world, even in the US, without the merchant knowing that it's Bitcoin. It automatically it actually exchanges to the value of whatever that is. There are already companies that are doing that. BitPay, I think, is one of them. Other companies where you have a debit card, it has Bitcoin on it, and then whatever transaction I have in any country in the world,
instantly converted to dollars.
Instantly converts it to any currency
in the world. Wow.
And there are countries. So the days of the U.S. policing the economic world through sanctions and all that, that's over. I mean, that's hypocrisy in my opinion. Where's the free market global economy? Like stopping Iran and North Korea and Russia and all this. You're trying to police the bad actors, but ultimately, it's going to prove to be futile. Like that's not where we're headed. And progressive leaders like a senator in North Carolina, they understand that. They understand that those are not the principles of America. I mean, they can make it illegal, but that's the only entity that's gonna hurt is the one who's stopping from the participation of this, instead of embracing it and saying, you know what, we can have thousands of currencies. I mean, I should point out that there's a flaw of Bitcoin, and that's scalability. So Bitcoin, as of 2017, 18, 19, the biggest problem it's had is if everybody adopted Bitcoin today, Bitcoin cannot scale. It would be too expensive to actually use Bitcoin as a currency. So it's not yet meant as a layer one solution to do that. And that's why there are layers on top of that, like the Lightning Network. So there are solutions around it. So there's still more development to be made before it's an actual currency. But I think it suffices to be a store of wealth for now.
So it's still not too late to get into Bitcoin, or too early?
Not at all. It's not too early. We're definitely not in the first inning anymore. I think if you were to put the baseball analogy, we're probably on inning 3 or 4 out of 9.
Okay. Well, I think you've made an excellent argument for Bitcoin. Again, this was to shed light on investing. Firas is a part of the Invest Info team. And if you've gained a bit of understanding into Bitcoin and you feel comfortable with investing in Bitcoin, we always say invest in things you understand. Do you want to add anything else, or that's it?
That's it. If anybody ever has questions or anything, they can direct it to you, and I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time. This is episode 22, and we'll see you guys in the next one.